Young Beggar returned a lost wallet, and the owner was a millionaire. The rain fell in sheets across Millbrook's Main Street, turning the cracked sidewalks into shallow rivers that carried cigarette butts and candy wrappers toward the storm drains. Maya Chen pressed herself deeper into the doorway of the abandoned hardware store, pulling her threadbare jacket tighter around her shoulders. The cardboard she'd been sitting on had long since turned to mush, and the cold seeped through her jeans like ice water. She was 23 years old, though most people guessed older. Life on the streets had a way of aging you, carving lines around your eyes and mouth that spoke of sleepless nights and empty stomachs. Her dark hair hung in tangles past her shoulders, and her hands, once the hands of a piano prodigy, were now calloused and dirty. That seemed like another lifetime ago. Before her mother's medical bills had swallowed their savings, before the eviction notice, before the choice between rent and chemotherapy became no choice at all, before she'd watched her mother slip away in a county hospital bed, leaving Maya alone in a world that suddenly felt too big and too cruel. The scholarship to Juilliard had expired, unclaimed. They'd said she could defer. But defer until when? Until she had a home address again, until she could afford to eat more than once a day. The piano that had been her whole world now sat in a pawn shop somewhere, sold for $300 that had barely lasted a week. Maya shifted her weight, trying to keep her feet from going numb. The soup kitchen didn't open for another 2 hours, and the shelter was full. It was always full on rainy nights. She'd spent the last of her change on a cup of coffee at the diner, nursing it for as long as she could, before the manager gave her that look that said, "Move along." A figure hurried past her doorway, head bent against the rain, and something dark tumbled from his coat pocket. It hit the wet pavement with a soft slap and lay there, already beginning to float in a puddle. Maya watched it for a moment, her mind foggy with cold and hunger. Then recognition sparked. A wallet. She glanced up. The man was already half a block away, turning the corner toward the business district. She could call out, but her voice would never carry over the drumming rain. And part of her, the part that had learned to survive these past 8 months, whispered that this might be her salvation. Wallets meant money. Money meant food, maybe a motel room, maybe a bus ticket to somewhere new. But then she thought of her mother, who had worked double shifts as a nurse to keep their small apartment, who had smiled through the pain to make sure Maya never missed a recital, who had taught her that integrity was the one thing no one could take from you. Maya stepped out into the rain. The wallet was expensive. She could tell that immediately. Black leather, probably Italian, with subtle stitching that spoke of craftsmanship. Her frozen fingers fumbled with it as she hurried after the man, water streaming down her face. "Sir!" Her voice cracked from disuse. "Sir, wait!" He didn't hear her. She broke into a run, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. The man was moving fast, and she was weak from days of insufficient food. Her lungs burned. "Please," she called out. "You dropped something." This time he paused, turning slightly. Even from a distance, Maya could see he was well dressed. A long wool coat, probably cashmere, and leather shoes that gleamed despite the rain. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going silver at the temples. She caught up to him, breathless, holding out the wallet with shaking hands. You dropped this." Up close, she could see his face clearly. He was probably in his mid-40s, with strong features and eyes that were a startling shade of grey-green. But it was the expression in those eyes that made her pause, a deep weariness that she recognized because she saw it in her own reflection in store windows. He stared at the wallet, then at her, his brow furrowing. He patted his coat pocket, seeming surprised. "I didn't even realize. It fell when you passed the hardware store," Maya said, trying not to shiver too obviously. "I thought you'd want it back." The man took the wallet slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. She became acutely aware of how she must look, soaked through, hollow-cheeked, with dirt under her fingernails and the smell of the streets clinging to her clothes. "You ran after me," he said. It wasn't a question, but there was something like wonder in his voice. "It's yours," she said simply. He opened the wallet, and Maya caught a glimpse of crisp bills, credit cards, a driver's license. Her stomach growled audibly, and she felt her face flush with shame. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Maya." She wrapped her arms around herself. I should go." "Wait." His voice was gentle but firm. "Please wait." He pulled out several bills. She couldn't see the denomination, and held them out to her. "For your honesty." Pride warred with necessity inside her. Pride lost. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching for the money. But instead of simply handing it to her, he held on, studying her face. "When did you last eat?" The question, asked with such quiet concern, nearly broke her. "I'm fine," she lied. "No," he said, "you're not." He glanced around, then gestured down the street. "There's a restaurant 2 blocks from here. Roberto's. Please, let me buy you a meal." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." His eyes were kind, but there was something else there too, a recognition, as if he saw something in her that others missed. "I want to. Please, it's the least I can do." Maya hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of strangers bearing gifts. The streets had taught her that kindness often came with strings attached, but the rain was cold, and she was so tired, and something in this man's face told her he understood what it was like to be lost. "Okay," she said quietly. As they walked together through the rain, the man, who introduced himself as James, held an umbrella over both of them. It was a small gesture, but to Maya, who had become invisible to most of the world, it felt like being seen again. Neither of them knew, as they walked those 2 blocks in companionable silence, that this moment would change both their lives forever, that the wallet was not just a wallet, but a doorway, that sometimes salvation comes not from being saved, but from having the courage to do the right thing when it would be so much easier to do the wrong one. The restaurant glowed warm and inviting ahead of them, and for the first time in 8 months, Maya felt something stir in her chest that she'd thought was dead. Hope. Roberto's was the kind of place Maya had once taken for granted. White tablecloths, soft lighting, the subtle clink of good silverware against porcelain. Now, as James held the door open for her, she felt acutely out of place. The hostess's smile faltered when she saw Maya's bedraggled appearance, her eyes flickering to James with a question. "Table for 2, please," James said calmly, as if there was nothing unusual about the situation. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore." The hostess's demeanor shifted immediately, and Maya caught the name. Whitmore. She'd seen it somewhere, on buildings maybe, or in the newspaper. "Right this way." They were led to a quiet corner booth, away from other diners. Maya slid into the leather seat, trying not to think about how she was probably leaving a wet mark. James sat across from her, his coat draped over the booth, and ordered them both coffee without asking. "I should clean up," Maya said, glancing toward the restrooms. "You're fine," James assured her. "No one here will judge you." But she could feel the stares, the whispers. She was used to them by now, the way people looked through homeless people as if they were ghosts, or looked at them with disgust, or sometimes with that particular kind of pity that made you feel less than human. The coffee arrived in delicate cups, and Maya wrapped her hands around hers, letting the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. She'd forgotten what good coffee tasted like, rich and smooth, not the burnt sludge from the shelter. James didn't speak at first, just sipped his own coffee and looked at her with those thoughtful eyes. Finally, he pushed a menu toward her. "Order anything you'd like." Maya stared at the menu, the prices making her dizzy. A single entree cost more than she used to spend on groceries for a week. I don't need much. Maybe just soup." "Maya?" James's voice was gentle. "When did you last have a real meal?" She thought about lying, but something about this man made her want to tell the truth. 3 days ago, the church had a community dinner." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Then please order what you actually want, not what you think is appropriate." When the waiter came, James ordered for both of them, starting with French onion soup, followed by herb-roasted chicken with vegetables and a side of fresh bread. Maya wanted to protest, but her traitorous stomach growled its approval. "So," James said when they were alone again. "Tell me about yourself. Not about," he gestured vaguely, "your current situation. Tell me about you." Maya wrapped her hands tighter around her coffee cup. "There's not much to tell." "I doubt that." He leaned back, his expression open and genuinely interested. "You returned a wallet that probably contained enough money to change your circumstances for a while. That tells me there's quite a lot to tell." She looked down. "My mother taught me better than to steal." "Your mother?" James's voice softened. "Is she—" "She died 8 months ago, cancer." The words still hurt to say, like swallowing glass. "I'm sorry." And he sounded like he meant it. "That's what led to—" Maya nodded. "Medical bills. She didn't have insurance. She let it lapse to afford my piano lessons." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Isn't that ironic? She sacrificed everything for my music, and now you play piano." "Played," she corrected herself firmly. Past tense. "Music isn't something you stop being. It's something you are." James tilted his head. "Where did you study?" "I had a scholarship to Juilliard before everything fell apart." His eyebrows rose. "Juilliard doesn't give scholarships to just anyone." "No," Maya agreed quietly. "They don't." The soup arrived, steam rising from the bowl in fragrant curls. Maya tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but she was so hungry that the first few spoonfuls disappeared before she could stop herself. James pretended not to notice, eating his own soup at a leisurely pace. "I lost someone too," he said after a while. "My wife, 3 years ago." Maya looked up, seeing the grief that still lingered in his eyes. "I'm sorry. She was everything to me. We built a life together, a company together. When she died, it felt like the world stopped making sense." He stared into his soup. "I threw myself into work, into making money, into expanding the business, as if success could fill the hole she left behind." "Did it work?" Maya asked. "No." His smile was sad. "It just made the hole bigger, because there was no one to share any of it with." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two wounded souls recognizing each other across a restaurant table. "You know what the worst part is?" Maya said suddenly. "It's not the hunger or the cold or even the fear. It's becoming invisible. People look right through you. You stop being a person and become a problem, something to step around or ignore." "I see you," James said simply. The main course arrived, and Maya had to blink back tears at the sight of it. Perfectly roasted chicken, golden and crisp, vegetables that actually looked fresh and colorful, food as it was meant to be, not just sustenance, but nourishment. "I have a proposition for you," James said as they ate. "My company is hosting a charity gala next week. We need servers, coat check, various positions. It's one night, but it pays well. I can put in a word." "Why?" Maya interrupted. "Why would you do that for me?" James set down his fork. "Because 3 years ago, I stood at my wife's grave and realized I'd become someone she wouldn't recognize. Someone who looked at quarterly reports instead of people. Someone who measured success in dollars instead of kindness." He met her eyes. "You returned my wallet. You could have taken the money. God knows you needed it more than I do. But you didn't. You ran through the rain to return it to a stranger. That kind of integrity is rare. I'd like to help you if you'll let me." Maya felt something crack open inside her chest. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's a job. You'll work for the money, same as anyone else." He paused. "But I'll be honest, I have an ulterior motive. My company, Whitmore Enterprises, we've become efficient, profit-driven. We've forgotten the human element, having someone like you around, someone who still believes in doing the right thing, even when it costs you. I think we could use that reminder." "Someone like me," Maya repeated, glancing down at her stained clothes. "Someone with integrity," James corrected gently. "Someone who hasn't let circumstances corrupt their character." Maya wanted to refuse. Pride whispered that she should walk away, that accepting help was weakness. But then she thought of her mother, who had never been too proud to accept kindness when it was offered with genuine respect. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll take the job, but just the one night, and only if you let me earn it properly." James smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Deal." As they finished their meal, talking about nothing and everything, Maya felt something shift inside her. The weight she'd been carrying didn't disappear, but it felt somehow lighter. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt like a person again, instead of a shadow. When they parted outside the restaurant, James pressing a business card and some folded bills into her hand despite her protests. "For suitable clothes for the gala," he insisted. Maya stood in the rain and watched him walk away. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of her transformation. Not because a wealthy man had bought her dinner, but because someone had seen her, really seen her, and reminded her that she was still worth seeing. The rain continued to fall, but it felt different now, less like judgment, more like cleansing. Maya looked down at the business card in her hand. James Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Enterprises. She tucked it carefully into her pocket next to her heart and began walking toward the shelter. For the first time in months, she wasn't just surviving. She was beginning to hope. Maya stood outside the Whitmore building, clutching a shopping bag from the thrift store. She'd used some of the money James had given her to buy black slacks and a white blouse, suitable for serving at a gala, the store clerk had assured her. The rest she'd saved, tucking it away with an almost religious reverence. The building loomed above her, all glass and steel, reflecting the late afternoon sun. She'd washed her hair in the public restroom at the bus station, scrubbing herself as clean as she could manage. Her hands were still rough, her face still too thin, but at least she looked presentable. "Maya!" James's assistant, Caroline, hurried toward her with a clipboard and a harried expression. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "Thank goodness you're here. Follow me. We're running behind schedule." The next hour passed in a blur of orientation. Maya learned where to stand, how to hold a tray, which glasses were for champagne and which were for wine. The other servers were professionals, eyeing her with undisguised curiosity. She kept her head down and focused on the instructions. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the space, and round tables draped in ivory linen filled the room. A string quartet tuned their instruments in the corner, and Maya felt her heart constrict at the familiar sight of a piano waiting on the small stage. "You'll be stationed near the east entrance," Caroline instructed, handing Maya a tray of champagne flutes. "Smile, offer drinks, and try not to drop anything." Maya took her position as the guests began to arrive. They swept in wearing designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, dripping with jewelry and confidence. She recognized faces from magazines, business leaders, politicians, local celebrities. The wealth in this room could probably solve the homelessness problem in Millbrook 10 times over. She pushed the bitter thought away and focused on her job, moving through the crowd with her tray, murmuring "champagne" in a quiet voice. Most guests took glasses without even looking at her. She was invisible again, just a servant, background scenery. It should have bothered her, but after months on the streets, being ignored felt almost familiar. Maya. She turned to find James approaching, looking elegant in a tuxedo, but it was his smile, warm and genuine, that made him stand out from everyone else in the room. "Mr. Whitmore," she said formally. "James," he corrected gently. "How are you holding up?" "Fine. Thank you for this opportunity." He studied her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her professional mask to the exhaustion beneath. "There's someone I'd like you to meet later, a friend of mine who runs a non-profit. But first, enjoy the evening as much as you can." He moved on to greet other guests, and Maya returned to her rounds. The evening progressed with speeches about philanthropy and corporate responsibility. She tried not to think about the irony of wealthy people congratulating themselves for donating money they'd never miss. During dinner service, Maya was stationed near the kitchen doors, ready to assist with courses. That's when she overheard the conversation. "Whitmore's lost his edge," a man in an expensive suit was saying to his companion. "Ever since his wife died, he's gone soft. All this charity work, these human-centered initiatives, it's costing the company money." "I heard he hired some homeless girl," the companion replied. Can you imagine one of these bleeding heart gestures that'll blow up in his face? Maya's hands tightened on her tray. She wanted to speak up, to defend James, but she was just a server. No one would listen. The board's getting restless, the first man continued. If he doesn't refocus on profits soon, they might push him out. His wife's family still owns 40% of the stock. Maya moved away, her mind churning. She'd assumed James was untouchable in his own company, but apparently even millionaires had their struggles. After dinner, as guests mingled and the string quartet played, Caroline approached Maya with an unusual request. "Mr. Whitmore needs someone to help in the coat check. Miriam called in sick. Would you mind?" Maya was relieved to escape the crowded ballroom. The coat check was quieter, just her and a steady stream of guests retrieving wraps and jackets. She was organizing fur coats, more furs than she'd ever seen in her life, when she heard raised voices from the hallway. "You're embarrassing yourself, James." It was a woman's voice, sharp and cultured. "First, this obsession with charity, and now you're hiring strays off the street. Victoria, that's enough." James's voice was calm but firm. "Your wife would be ashamed. She built this company with you, and you're running it into the ground with your guilt complex." Demaya peeked around the corner. James stood facing an elegant woman in her 60s, her face tight with anger. His ex-mother-in-law, Maya guessed. "Don't presume to know what Diane would think," James said quietly. "She taught me that business without humanity is just greed with better PR. Humanity doesn't pay dividends," Victoria snapped. "No," James agreed, "but it pays in ways that matter more." Victoria's laugh was cold. "You always were too sentimental. It's going to destroy you." She swept past him, nearly colliding with Maya, who scrambled back to the coat check. James appeared a moment later, his jaw tight with tension. He saw Maya, and his expression softened slightly. "You heard that." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to eavesdrop." "It's fine." He leaned against the counter, suddenly looking very tired. "Victoria thinks I've lost my way. Maybe she's right." "She's not," Maya said before she could stop herself. "You haven't lost your way. You've just found a better one." He looked at her with surprise. "You think so?" "I know so. Anyone can make money. It takes real courage to care about something more than profit." She hesitated, then added, "Your wife would be proud of you." James's eyes glistened slightly. "I hope so. God, I hope so." They stood in silence for a moment, two people who understood loss in a room full of people who had everything. "The friend I mentioned earlier," James said abruptly. "She runs a job training program. It's not charity. It's real work, real skills. I thought, if you're interested." Maya's heart raced. "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Because someone did it for me once," James said. "When I was starting out, broke and desperate, someone took a chance on me. They didn't have to. They just believed in me before I believed in myself." He met her eyes. "I see that same potential in you, Maya. The question is, do you see it in yourself?" Did she? After months of being invisible, of being told by circumstance that she was worthless, could she still believe she was worth investing in? She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed everything for Maya's dreams. She thought of the piano gathering dust in a pawn shop, the music that still sang in her blood, even when she tried to silence it. She thought of that morning running through the rain to return a wallet to a stranger. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I do." James smiled. "Good. Then let's talk about your future." As the gala wound down and guests departed with their expensive coats and their comfortable lives, Maya felt something fundamental shift inside her. This wasn't about being rescued. This was about being given a chance to rescue herself. And for the first time since her mother's death, she felt ready to take it. The evening ended with James introducing her to Sarah Chen, director of New Beginnings, a program that helped people transition from homelessness to employment. Sarah was matter-of-fact and kind, without a trace of pity in her eyes. "We start next Monday," Sarah said, handing Maya a card. "Housing, job training, counseling if you need it. It's a 6-month program. What you make of it is up to you. What you make of it is up to you." Maya clutched the card like a lifeline and realized that's exactly what it was. Not a rescue, a beginning. 3 months later, Maya stood in front of the mirror in her small but clean apartment, hardly recognizing herself. The New Beginnings program had provided her with temporary housing, a studio with a twin bed, a kitchenette, and her own bathroom. Luxuries she'd once taken for granted now felt like miracles. But the real change went deeper than clean clothes and regular meals. It was in her eyes, which no longer held that hollow look of defeat. It was in her posture, shoulders back instead of hunched protectively. It was in her hands, which had learned to operate a computer, write a resume, and present herself professionally. The job training had been intensive. She'd learned office skills, customer service, interview techniques. She'd attended workshops on financial literacy and apartment hunting. But more than skills, the program had given her back something she'd lost on the streets: dignity. Sarah had become more than a program director. She'd become a mentor and friend. "You're one of our success stories," she'd told Maya last week. "Most participants are still finding their footing at 3 months. You're already applying for permanent positions." Maya had interviews lined up. Nothing glamorous, mostly administrative work, but honest jobs with steady paychecks. The music still called to her sometimes, especially late at night when the world was quiet, but she'd learned to quiet that voice. Piano was a dream from another life. This was about survival. She was surprised when James had called that morning, asking to meet for coffee. She'd seen him only once since the gala, when he'd stopped by New Beginnings to check on her progress. He'd kept his distance, as if afraid of influencing her journey, and she'd appreciated that respect. Now, as she walked to the coffee shop, a different one than before, one where she could afford to buy her own drink, she wondered what he wanted. He was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups. He stood when he saw her, and his smile was proud. "Maya, you look wonderful." "Thank you." She sat down, accepting the coffee he slid toward her. "Sarah says you've been very generous to the program. It's a good cause, though I suspect my donations increased significantly after meeting you." His eyes twinkled. "I have an ulterior motive, I'm afraid." Maya's stomach tightened. She'd learned to be wary of ulterior motives. James must have seen her reaction because he quickly added, "Nothing inappropriate, I promise. It's about a job. I have interviews scheduled. This is different." He leaned forward. "Whitmore Enterprises is launching a new initiative. Community outreach, partnering with local organizations, creating pathways for underserved populations to enter the workforce. We need someone to help develop the program, someone who understands both sides, business and poverty." Maya stared at him. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you an opportunity. It's not a handout. The work is real. The challenge is significant. But I think you're uniquely qualified." He paused. "Sarah thinks so too. I consulted with her first." "What would I be doing?" Over the next hour, James outlined the position. It was part program coordinator, part advocate, part bridge between 2 worlds. She'd work with other companies in Millbrook, helping them develop their own pathways programs. She'd mentor participants, advocate for policy changes, and help design training curricula. "It's not easy work," James warned. "You'll face skepticism from business leaders who see it as charity, and suspicion from people who think you've sold out. The pay is modest compared to other positions at our company." "But I'd be helping people like me," Maya said softly. "Exactly." James sat back. "You returned my wallet because it was the right thing to do, even when it cost you. Now I'm asking you to do something harder. Take a chance on yourself. Use your experience to help others." Maya's mind raced. This was more than a job. It was purpose, but doubt crept in. "What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" "What if you succeed?" James countered. "What if you're exactly what this program needs?" He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "I've been where you are, Maya. After Diane died, I didn't think I was capable of anything beyond going through the motions. But someone believed in me, my wife believed in me, and that belief gave me permission to believe in myself." "This feels too big," Maya whispered. "Good, the best things usually do." James smiled gently. But you don't have to decide now. Think about it. Talk to Sarah. Sleep on it. Maya nodded, her thoughts whirling. As they stood to leave, James hesitated. There's something else. Next month we're hosting a smaller event, a fundraiser for new beginnings. There will be music, and I wondered, he looked almost shy, I wondered if you'd consider playing, just one piece. I've heard you're quite talented. Maya's breath caught. I haven't played in months, nearly a year. Music isn't something you forget. I don't even have access to a piano. There's one in my office, James said quietly. It was Diane's. It's been silent since she died. I think she'd like it to be played again. That evening, Maya found herself in James's office after hours. The piano was a beautiful grand, its surface gleaming in the soft light. She approached it like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing the keys, ivory and ebony, familiar as old friends. She sat on the bench, closed her eyes, and let her hands find their places. The first notes were hesitant, rusty, but then muscle memory took over, and suddenly she was playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her mother's favorite. The music poured out of her, all the grief and loss and hope she'd carried for the past year. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop playing. She didn't notice James standing in the doorway, his own eyes wet with tears. Didn't see the way he leaned against the frame, as if the music was holding him up. Didn't know that this was the first time he'd heard music in his office since Diane's death, the first time the silence had been broken. When she finished, the last notes hanging in the air like a prayer, she opened her eyes to find James watching her. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'd forgotten," Maya whispered. "I'd forgotten what it felt like. Don't forget again." He crossed to the piano, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Promise me you won't give up on your music. Whatever else you do, whatever job you take, promise me that." "I promise." The words felt like a vow. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Maya had thought of James as her benefactor, her savior, but now she realized he'd been saving himself too, that in helping her, he'd found a purpose beyond grief. "I'll take the job," she said suddenly. James's face lit up. "You will?" "Yes, but on one condition." "Name it." "You promise to keep moving forward too, not just with work, but with life, with living." She met his eyes directly. "Your wife wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life in mourning." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Deal. We move forward together." As Maya left that evening, the city lights of Millbrook spread out below her. She realized something profound. She'd thought returning the wallet was a single act of honesty, but it had been the beginning of something larger, not just her transformation, but James's too. They were healing each other, these two wounded souls, and in the process they were becoming something neither had been before. Whole. 6 months after returning the wallet, Maya stood on the stage at the New Beginnings fundraiser, her fingers poised above the piano keys. The small concert hall was packed with donors, program participants, and community leaders. But she barely saw them. All she could see was the music in front of her, a piece she'd composed herself, titled "Finding Home." She'd been working at Whitmore Enterprises for 3 months now, and the Community Pathways program was already showing success. 4 other companies had adopted similar initiatives. 23 people had found permanent employment. The mayor was talking about making it citywide, but more than professional success, Maya had found something else, herself. The girl who'd sat in doorways, invisible and forgotten, had become a woman who spoke at city council meetings and advocated for change. She'd reclaimed her music, practicing on Diane's piano every evening after work, with James often listening from his office, the sound healing them both. Their relationship had shifted too, in ways neither had anticipated. What had started as gratitude had deepened into friendship and then into something more. They'd fought it at first, both aware of the power imbalance, the potential for complications. But feelings didn't follow rules of propriety. It was Sarah who'd finally confronted them 3 weeks ago. "You two are ridiculous," she'd said, watching them carefully avoid eye contact during a program meeting. "You're both adults. You both care about each other. Stop overthinking it." But Maya had needed to be sure she could stand on her own first, that whatever existed between them was built on equality, not rescue. She'd needed James to see her not as a charity case, but as a partner. Tonight was about proving that, to herself, to him, to everyone who doubted her journey. She began to play. The composition started soft and melancholic, echoing the loneliness of those months on the streets. But it evolved, growing stronger, more complex, weaving in themes of hope and resilience. The audience sat transfixed as her fingers flew across the keys, pouring out her story in notes instead of words. In the third row, James watched with tears streaming unashamedly down his face. He'd heard her practice this piece, knew every measure by heart. But seeing her here, transformed and triumphant, sharing her gift with the world, it broke something open inside him that had been closed since Diane's death. Maya's eyes found his as she played the final movement, a soaring melody that spoke of new beginnings and unexpected joy. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, and in that moment, everyone in the room could see what existed between them. The music ended with a gentle, hopeful chord that hung in the air like a promise. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Maya stood bowing slightly, her heart pounding. She'd done it. She'd faced her fear and reclaimed her music. But more than that, she'd proven she was more than her circumstances. She was an artist, an advocate, a survivor. After the performance, people crowded around her, program participants thanking her for her advocacy, donors praising her talent, journalists asking for interviews. Maya handled it all with grace, but her eyes kept searching the crowd for James. She found him on the balcony, looking out over the city. He turned when he heard her approach, and his smile was radiant. "You were magnificent," he said. "Thank you." She joined him at the railing, their shoulders almost touching. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For giving me a chance." "You gave yourself the chance, Maya. I just opened a door. You walked through it." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Millbrook twinkle below. This city, that had once felt so cruel, now felt like home. Not because it had changed, but because she had. "I found something today," James said quietly, reaching into his pocket. "I was cleaning out my desk and discovered this in an old coat." He held up his wallet, the same one Maya had returned 6 months ago. "I'd put it away after that night, kept it as a reminder, and I found something I'd missed before." He opened it and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "It was tucked behind my driver's license. I must have grabbed it months ago and forgotten about it." Maya took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a program from a piano recital at Millbrook Community Center from 2 years ago. And there, listed among the performers, was her name, Maya Chen, performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. "I was there," James whispered. "Diane and I attended. We were so moved by your performance. She said," his voice caught, "she said you had a gift for turning pain into beauty." Maya's eyes widened. "You heard me play before? Before the wallet?" "I didn't make the connection until I saw your name. But yes, Diane made me buy a program because she wanted to remember your name." He laughed softly. "She had a feeling about you. She said you were going to do something important with your music." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. The threads of fate that had woven their lives together were more intricate than she'd imagined. She was right. "I just had to lose everything first to find it." "Maybe we both did." James turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "I've been holding back, trying to be appropriate, trying not to take advantage. But Maya, I need you to know, what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or pity or any kind of savior complex." "I know," she said softly. "You've become my best friend, my inspiration, my—" He paused, gathering courage. "My hope for the future. I love you, Maya. Not the girl who returned my wallet, not the woman I helped off the streets, but you, the strong, talented, compassionate person you are." Maya's heart felt like it might burst. I love you too. But I needed to know I could stand on my own first, that I was choosing you, not clinging to you. And can you stand on your own? She thought about her apartment, her job, her music, the life she'd rebuilt from nothing. Yes, I can stand on my own. She squeezed his hands, which means I can also choose to stand with you. James pulled her into his arms and she melted into his embrace. It felt nothing like rescue. It felt like coming home. What would Diane think? Maya asked, her voice muffled against his chest. James laughed, a sound of pure joy. I think she'd say it's about time. She always told me I was too cautious, that I needed someone to shake up my world. He pulled back to look at Maya. You certainly did that. You shook up mine too. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Below them, the city hummed with life. The same city where Maya had once been invisible, where she'd huddled in doorways and wondered if she'd survive another day. Now, it sparkled with possibility. The fundraiser continued inside, but they stayed on the balcony, talking about the future, about the Pathways program expanding statewide, about Maya applying to music school part-time, about building a life together that honored both their pasts and their future. I want to do something, Maya said suddenly. With my first real paycheck, I want to buy back my mother's piano from the pawn shop. James smiled. We'll go together, and then you'll have 2 pianos, one at work, one at home. Home, Maya repeated, testing the word. It had been so long since she'd had one. Where is home? Wherever we are, James said simply. Together. As they returned to the fundraiser hand in hand, they passed a young woman hesitating at the entrance. She was thin, her clothes worn, her eyes holding that familiar hollow look. Maya recognized her immediately, recognized herself from 6 months ago. She approached the woman gently. Are you looking for the New Beginnings program? The woman nodded hesitantly. I saw the flyer, but I don't belong here. All these fancy people. You belong here, Maya said firmly. I know because I was you. 6 months ago, I was living on the streets. Now, I'm the program coordinator. She held out her hand. I'm Maya Chen. What's your name? Jessica, the woman whispered. Well, Jessica, let me tell you about second chances. Maya guided her inside, toward Sarah and the registration table, toward hope and possibility. James watched with pride, seeing Maya pay forward the gift she'd been given. This, he realized, was what Diane had wanted for him. Not to stop grieving, but to let love transform that grief into something beautiful. To let loss teach him compassion. To let pain make him more human, not less. The evening ended with Maya and James standing together as Sarah announced the fundraiser had exceeded its goals. The Community Pathways program was secure for another year. More lives would be changed. More people would be given the chance Maya had received. Later, as they walked through the streets of Millbrook together, they passed the doorway where they'd first met. Maya paused, looking at the spot where she'd once huddled against the rain. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? James asked. For losing your wallet. She grinned at his surprised expression. If I hadn't found it, if I hadn't decided to return it, we wouldn't be here. James laughed. Best thing I ever lost. He pulled her close. You know what the real miracle is? It's not that you returned the wallet. It's that you believed you were the kind of person who would. Even when you had every reason not to believe in yourself, you believed in your integrity. My mother taught me that, Maya said softly. She used to say integrity is what you do when no one's watching. When returning that wallet, I thought no one would know if I kept it, but I would have known, and I couldn't live with that person. That's what makes you remarkable. James kissed her forehead. You saved yourself, Maya. I just reminded you that you were worth saving. They walked on, 2 souls who'd been lost and had found each other. Behind them, the city lights glowed warm and welcoming. Ahead, the future stretched out full of promise. Maya Chen had started that rainy day with nothing but her integrity. She'd returned a wallet to a stranger and received her life back in return. But the real gift wasn't the job or the apartment or even the love. It was remembering who she was beneath the circumstances. It was reclaiming her worth. And James Whitmore, who'd lost his way in grief, had found his purpose again, not in profit margins or corporate success, but in human connection, in using his privilege to open doors for others, in loving someone who reminded him that strength and vulnerability could coexist. They'd both learned the same lesson in the end. Sometimes losing everything is how you discover what truly matters. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness, returning a lost wallet, can change two lives forever. As they turned the corner toward home, Maya hummed the melody from her composition. James joined in, his bass voice blending with her soprano, creating harmony. It was the sound of two broken people becoming whole. The sound of redemption, the sound of love finding a way. And in a small town in America, on an ordinary street, two extraordinary people walked into their future together, proving that happy endings aren't about being rescued. They're about having the courage to save yourself and the wisdom to let others help you along the way. The end.